Bandwidth for First Updates Now is supported by the Blue Alliance. Keep up to date on all live and archived FIRST Robotics events and team stats at thebluealliance.com. First Updates Now is brought to you by Twitch. Fun is now a Twitch partner and offering some awesome subscriber-only benefits. Subscribe today or get a free subscription each month when you have Amazon Prime by linking your account and clicking subscribe.
Shut up and sit down.
Tonight on Candidly Speaking, we'll dive deep with international game piece options for all teams, team version field drawings, the FRC pricing model and how it could impact regionals and districts, and of course, the massive FRC waitlist that is generated and how it's impacted teams. This is Candidly Speaking for First Updates Now. I'm Libby, Kamen, Drost.
That's right. That's Libby with the new last name. Congratulations on your wedding, Libby. We're all excited for you. And that was a beautiful day. So thanks for having me. And it was, pretty awesome. And I am Karthik, Kanagasabapathy. And today, joining us, we have the man who, let's talk about their team for a second here. In 2013, they came around to champs. They seeded #1 in their division. People thought it was kind of a fluke. And what have they done? They've gone to Einstein 2013, 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017, arguably the most successful team in FRC for the last 5 years. Please welcome Mike Corsetto from the Citrus Circuits, Team 1678, and he has brought a great list of topics for us to discuss today. Hey, Mike.
Hey, Karthik. Thanks for having me on, guys. I'm really excited to dive into some of these topics and speak candidly. This should be a fun time.
I think this is going to be a good one.
Yeah, for those of you who aren't familiar with Mike, he's has a lot of opinions about the FIRST Robotics competition. He's absolutely passionate, and he will not hesitate to shake up the status quo.
Sounds like a great enough night for us. So our first discussion tonight is about the international game piece option. FIRST provides the option for international teams to reduce their first choice credits by 20% in exchange for receiving an extra set of game elements with their kickoff kit. International teams do pay a premium for the game pieces, according to an FRC blog written by Kit Apart's engineer John Bryant. Quote, as the number of credits for this option is greater than the number of credits teams spend if using first choice normally to obtain game pieces because we recognize the advantage inherent in the timing of early receipt. We're not here to dispute at all that international teams should have this option. The question is, should this be opened up to teams in the United States as well to provide an equal experience to all teams, or does this provide a way to help level the playing field? And since we have, an international host here, we're going to let Karthik go first on this one.
Thank you. I think it's easy to forget that Canada's international sometimes. And for the most part, we share a similar culture to the US and, there's a very similar feel, but the border does crazy things when it comes to shipping. And can be very, very difficult to get things across the border. There's an additional cost in terms of tariffs, duties, and brokerage fees, and then there's the time delay. So if we order game pieces on Saturday from Andy Mark, and Andy goes through that first crunch of shipping, and there's already a couple days delay there just because there's so many things ordered. But any shipment that comes across the border can be held for a day to 3 to even a week. So it can be really damaging. So this game piece option was great for us to get more than one game piece with our kit of parts. It's a huge thing. Now, the theory is okay, well, wouldn't this be benefit everyone? Because, a team who's in Alaska or Hawaii or Seattle, where you're further away from Andy Mark headquarters, could benefit from this too. And there's obviously benefits from that. But the reason, so I've dealt with a lot of this international shipping on both sides from being an international team, also from helping organize an international robotics competition, the VEX robotics competition. And so the goal at VEX was always to have game pieces at the VEX Robotics World Championship. So when the new game was released, teams could buy and pick up game pieces right away. This was to help the international teams so they could, not have to have game pieces shipped to China. They could take them home with them on their planes. However, it was always tight. We had super tight deadlines to get game pieces there in time. And what we would end up doing is most of the game pieces would be coming over on a ship from Asia, while we would do a small airship of a limited number of things, and we would allocate those towards the international team. So if FIRST only has a small allocation of game pieces which are ready to be shipped to kickoff sites, and that shipping starts in November. So if they only have that small allocation, I would prefer that those go to the international teams.
Yeah, I think I completely agree with if it's a resource allocation issue, as you've explained. I think we all can agree that this was a big step up for international teams. And I think any team, even if you're only waiting a couple of days to receive the parts from AnyMark, knows how much of a hamper it can be on your development to only have one or two of a certain game piece, especially when we're talking about fuel this year. You're trying to build a fuel hopper to pump through so many balls, and you only have 10 to work with in the beginning. That's not enough to get a good sample size as far as if you're sorting through 50 or 60 fuel accurately. So, but I see what you're saying with the resource allocation. But I do think that on the flip side, there could be a world in which opening this option more makes it more scalable to what FIRST is doing. And I don't know what their pipeline looks like or how they're prepping kits, but it could be that if this became more standardized and was available to more teams, maybe it got easier on FIRST side to plan out ahead of time. And maybe it's something where teams, when they register, can indicate how many of how much of their FIRST credit they're willing to sacrifice for game elements from the get-go. And it could be a setting that's in there so they know what the demand is before they ever get around to prepping kits. Just an option.
Yeah, I think knowing the demand is, I mean, at this point, every team's going to need game pieces. And when they're at a point in their game design cycle that they know that they're, for example, with fuel, this is going to be something teams need a lot of. I think a team being able to put in and say, yeah, I'm going to sacrifice as much of my first choice credit as I can just to get whatever you, the game design committee, think I need. I think that lets it open. That's a really cool suggestion. I like it.
Yeah, I mean, although last year it would have been really, stupid if they gave a lot of teams a bunch of fuel because so few of them actually ever used it. So
right.
there is that difficulty, and I don't think. We clearly know the game design committee was not aware that so few teams were going to use fuel last year. So when you have multiple game pieces and such, it can be weird. I wasn't really involved with kit unpacking at all last year. How many fuel were in the actual kit of parts last year? Do either of you remember?
I want to say 10. But
yeah, it was like a little tiny bag. Yeah, maybe 10 or 15 would be my
which is a weird number considering if you were going to shoot fuel, you were definitely going to shoot more than 10, and if you weren't going to shoot fuel, 10 wasn't going to be a thing for you. But yeah, I think we could all agree that if the game pieces, this would be a nice option to extend to everyone because it allows FIRST to help understand the demand for the game pieces, and it gives everyone that head start where they're not having to wait a few days on game pieces. However, if there's limited resource allocation, there's only so many game pieces to go around. It seems like international should get it first. And I'll be completely honest, it should be prioritized that probably Australia and China and Israel should get them before Canada even does because we have far fewer issues.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's such a gap between, I know something was being mentioned in chat is that pre this option, Israeli teams weren't getting game pieces until week 4 or 5 of build, and it's that's not okay. There's no way you can do anything with that sort of time frame. So I think you guys are really spot on. It's if it's a resource issue, obviously it goes to international teams, but there should be an option potentially going forward, especially if the game pieces, hopefully game design committee sees this pattern of their community not being able to get the game pieces on time and struggling with finding the exact right one. So, something that's a little more open or potentially better accessible to teams would also be nice. But knowing that teams are going to want this, I think, the more they can expand to other teams. I don't think more teams getting game pieces ahead of time is going to make international teams, I'm not an international team, but particularly upset because everyone's going to be better from that, right? Everyone's going to improve from having access to game pieces on time.
Yeah, for international, we just wanted to make sure that we could get some of the same, access to things that the mainland U.S. teams were. It wasn't about trying to make things harder on them by any means. So now that we talked about that, our next topic is, it ties into those first few weeks of the season and trying to get your season ready. And we're talking about the team version field drawings. So we've seen the cost of field construction go up a lot the last couple of years, pretty much with the advent of themed games. The fields have become more intricate and more complicated. We've had cool fields. Cool at least in terms of that there's a lot going on, not in terms of the weird medieval times things going on. another story unto itself. But each year, teams are provided with an alternate version of the official field drawings from FIRST to, in theory, allow them to build their own versions of the field at home at a much more reasonable cost than the official all-steel packages that FIRST does. Mike, I know that the Citrus Circuits, among other teams, have struggled to build a field quickly and accurately based on these drawings in the past. In addition, sometimes teams struggle because the simple drawings, what could be constructed from the simple drawings is drastically different from the actual field. So what do you think could be done in the future to help teams be more successful in building a practice field?
Yeah, that's a great point. I think there's a couple of different possible approaches. One, taking a cue out from some of the other robotics programs out there. Maybe there's an option to start productizing some of these field elements, not just the game objects. So maybe there's a world in which some of these can be off-the-shelf purchase kits that come in a week, and then you have just assemble and put together, maybe not quite the size of an airship, but some of these other smaller components maybe could be designed to be a product more than a homebrew option. I think another great thing that would really help out is getting a buy list for field elements beforehand. So like if you want to make half a field worth of field elements, buy these pieces of wood and 2x4s before the season starts to have it on hand. I know on Citrus Circuits, we have a group of very dedicated parents that will build our field elements over that first weekend, and that gets us about 80% of the way there. But the thing that they have a hard time doing, and this is kind of the other side to this story, is they have a really hard time understanding what aspects of the field drawings are not adequate to replicate competition conditions. And I think every year, especially the past couple of years, there's been huge holes between what they tell us to build and what you actually need to know in order to be competitive. I think back to the 2016 field elements and the defenses, and building some of those defenses out of wood was going to be a vastly different experience driving over them than the competition steel defenses. And even this year with the touch pads being just a flat piece of plywood at the top of a platform, that did not simulate the davit being right in the middle. So a lot of teams, their winch systems would get up to the top and would jam on the davit without properly triggering the touchpad. And I know that seems minor, but at the same time, that costed teams that didn't understand that aspect of the challenge. It cost them matches, and I think that's doing them a disservice by not having adequate team drawings. So I think there's a possibility to improve some of these things in order to give teams a better idea of what they're going to see when they get to the competition.
I totally agree. I think so. I have a piece that's maybe like less question specific, but I also would think it's great for leveling the playing field for everyone by literally making a simpler playing field. That would be nice. I know that that's hard because so many of the game challenges in the past year have been these like really cool technical challenges, like climbing a rope or doing all these other things. But at the same time, teams that can't build that are not going to be able to accomplish it. And so what does that create for your competition? What does that make your competition look like? It's a bunch of teams that flail and fail and can't do that objective. So I think there's a piece of that. But the other thing is I'm on board with the idea of that kind of it doesn't have to be, specific information, whatever, but you need this many sheets of plywood, you need this many hinges, you need this many springs of relatively this spec. Something that we don't have to spend precious team resources, mainly money and time, in the middle of a 6-week build season, more towards the beginning, but in that time that we could go buy things ahead of time and spend a little bit less time. Our team, we were kind of discussing this pre-show, but my team has the luxury of having extra hands, extra labor, extra people. There is a group of students who are like, yep, we're going to build the field. That's like our job this week. While everybody's talking strategy, talking, preliminary design, we're going to go build a field. And that's great. That's awesome. But that's not common. Most teams are not as big as the team I work with. And it's such a drain on smaller teams and teams with fewer resources to have to do all this crazy, crazy complex stuff. And I think that's where, accurate drawings or a more accurate materials list, something like that would be really helpful, but also truly something that's simpler to build lets the teams focus on their actual season and their actual robot construction for sure.
Yeah, I think we also need to talk about just how much of a nightmare those drawings can be. I'm fairly confident no one at FIRST builds these things before they give us the drawings, because my parents every year just are pulling their hair out trying to understand why they had them do some of the things that they had them do and why they drew it out the way they did. It can be so difficult to decipher some of these drawings. And that goes to also like field markings and stuff like that. It sometimes takes, it feels like a Karthik's degree in mathematics in order to understand exactly where the lines are supposed to be to get the dimensions you actually care about out of some of these drawings. So I think there could be a lot. I know Frank mentioned yesterday that they hired on a new mechanical engineer. I don't know if they're going to be working on any of this stuff, but hopefully they can put a little bit more thorough work into some of these drawings that teams are expected to work with, because there's a lot of downstream customers for some of these things, and making those a little bit better, I think, would go a long way.
Well, I mean, I say this a lot when it comes to the FRC program, but building a robot is a hard enough challenge. Teams don't need the additional challenge of trying to build a complicated field. Like just little things. Like last year, it was not intuitive to figure out what angle the walls had to be at the diagonals where the goals were last year. Like that was just an extra challenge. You've got to figure that stuff out. And I mean, FIRST has changed dramatically over the last 15 years, 20 years. When I started, most teams had an army of professional engineers. Now you have so many teams where it's one teacher and a bunch of students. And we're just creating barrier after barrier for them. And I love Mike's idea of having like, hey, go on AndyMark, buy this kit, and this will assemble what you need for this part of the field and for this part of the field. This is what they do in FTC. This is what they do in VRC. I understand that those programs are way smaller and the field's 12 by 12 and it's a completely different ballpark, but it would have been nice last year if there was a kit for the lift, just to, or a kit for the touchpad, a lift kit, a touchpad kit, and then maybe something for the goal, But when they say, hey, just use a garbage can, it simulates the goal. The garbage can didn't simulate the goal at all. The funnel had such unique properties that were so crucial. And so, it's short selling teams. And, a lot of teams who don't have experience, like people always talk about why are the same teams good year after year? And one of the biggest reasons is it's the consistency those teams have because they've fallen into these traps before, where a new team's just going to be like, oh yeah, the garbage can's going to be fine. And oh, sure, we don't need a spring. They say we don't need a spring. It'll be exactly the same. And it's like, or all springs are the same. Like these are actual differences. So it would be nice, if they were still going to do the system where they say, here's some team built elements, but let's give us a heads up of, hey, this is one where you might want to try and simulate it more accurately. You talk about the defenses, a wooden moat versus a metal moat. It was a totally different sort of thing, So it's, and if you are going to make the field such that it's hard to simulate, you need to make the field more forgiving. And so that's one thing I did like about the touchpads this year. They were pretty forgiving. Like they triggered relatively easily, more easily than I thought they would. When I saw that giant davit in the middle, I was like, oh man, this is going to be really bad. But it was easier. So, I'm not saying make the game challenges easier, but don't like last year, like the goal should have been with the touchpad. And I think it kind of ended up that way. The goal is for teams to get points when they raise their robot by a certain distance. The goal should not be for teams to get points when they raise their robots a certain distance and then make sure a touchpad moves a certain point. It was the mini-bot issue with the polls in 2011. There were plenty of teams who fired a mini-bot up there. It got to the top and touched the top, but they didn't get points for it. That looks crazy to the audience, and it's just not a good experience. So a more forgiving field. Libby talked about it'd be nice if they had simpler fields. And some of the best games they've ever had have been with extremely simple fields. Aerial assist. I have problems with that game for some of the referee calls and whatever, but that was a wide open, empty field, and that game played great. And so if you make one of your constraints during game design that the field has to be simple and then work around it, you can do a lot. I can give you some background for the VEX GDC, but we have huge constraints that the field has to be able to cost less than $500, period. So teams can just buy a $500 kit and build that field. There's been all sorts of crazy things we wanted to do with the games, and we couldn't. We just absolutely couldn't because it broke that cost barrier. That was a hard cap for us. And so if in game design, they said the field can only have X degrees of complication, that could really make all of this easier. It's like, I think something that the community does is we always look at like, how can we make changes to the existing system to make things easier? But I think sometimes you have to look at the underlying system and say, what changes can we make there because that's where the actual problem is. Go to the root.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So we get to move into our next discussion topic, which is the FRC pricing model and also how it can impact current as well as new competition events. So currently, FIRST combines the fees for team registration, first event registration, and kit of parts fees into the initial payment. Other robotics programs separate these fees, which helps establish transparency on how the fees are distributed to headquarters, events, and the kit of parts suppliers. Part of this conversation potentially filters into income distribution for regional and district events and the minimum event standard expected for both events. I have a lot of opinions on this. Mike, I know you do as well. So let's start with you and discuss your opinion on the pricing model and event standards.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes down to it, you hit a lot of it in the summary. Every other mainstream robotics competition has separate prices for all of these various aspects to the team experience. And FIRST, because it was really kind of one of the first, if not the first player, they've stuck with this archaic pricing model for the last 20 something years. I mean, I don't know how long it's been, $5,000 to $6,000, but ever since I've been a part of the program, it's been this way. And other programs have evolved since then and have developed a model that makes more sense. But right now, as a FIRST team, you really don't know what your $5,000 goes to. And then furthermore, you don't understand what the $4,000 goes to go to one more event.
And then it doesn't go to anything.
It doesn't go to anything. It goes to FIRST bottom line, and that's about it. And so, I think it's really important to understand just how much of FIRST headquarters is funded off of FRC teams. And it's a little bit of it gets me frustrated at times because the way that FIRST sells the program is, hey, sponsor, you want to start this team, you're going to have to pay us $6,000 to start that team. And they're like, oh, it costs $6,000 to get a group of 5 high school kids excited about STEM. That's not true at all. But because FIRST has set this big price tag, they're able to sell sponsors on it. So what they're doing is they're pulling more money out of sponsors, but then that's also squeezing the teams that are just trying to survive past year 3 when they don't have this easy grant money that FIRST has softballed to them for the first 2 years. So and because there's no transparency, you don't understand if your money's going towards a kit, an event. Well, it certainly doesn't go to the event because the events are funding themselves, which I think is kind of garbage as well. But it's crazy how little transparency there is for FRC, and FRC is funding FIRST. FLL doesn't fund FIRST. FTC doesn't fund FIRST. FRC teams fund FIRST as a whole, and I don't think it's great. I don't think it's a genuine of FIRST to do it that way. I think there needs to be a little bit more of a balanced approach.
Before we go too deep down this topic, I do kind of want to, because I think there's going to be a lot of our viewers who don't actually understand how this model works, and because people are always surprised. So when you pay your registration fee to FIRST, you sign up for an event. So let's forget about districts right now. Let's just talk about teams in the regional model. So Mike signs up for the Sacramento event. He spends $5,000 US to sign up for that event. All $5,000 of that event go to FIRST headquarters. $0 goes to the regional. You're not actually paying the regional. So then Mike signs up for a second event, and maybe one day he'll get into a second event. I don't know. That's another story later on.
That's the next one. We can get there.
Because you pay for that first event, and you're like, okay, for that first event, I get my right to be a FIRST Robotics competition team, and I get my kit of parts, and there's lots of stuff in the kit of parts when there actually isn't really that much stuff in the kit of parts, but they get their kit of parts. The second event, you pay $4,000, and you don't get a second kit of parts, so that's not what you're getting from it. And none of this money is going to go to the Silicon Valley Regional or wherever Mike gets in. It's probably going to be like Western Canada or something. But the money's not going there. So where's that money going? And as Mike said, it's going to underwrite the costs of the FIRST Robotics competition, maybe underwriting FTC, FLL. I don't actually know exactly what the money's doing. I know it's going to FIRST headquarters. It's not going back to the event. I'm sure a good portion of it is paying for the championship event because the championship event is very expensive to put together. And having done Vex Worlds, I know how much that costs. But so it's important for people to realize that the registration fees you pay are not actually going to the local events. It's up to the local events to fundraise. The next thing that I think that people don't realize is how much local events can cost. So some district events run for as little as $10,000. That's, it's a common number I've heard, especially in Michigan, Pacific Northwest. There are regional events that cost $200,000 to run. That is not an exaggeration. That is an actual number. It used to be that pretty much all regional events, they used to tell, I used to serve on a regional planning committee. They used to tell you that budget for $125,000 to $200,000. There are far fewer events that cost that much now, but that $200,000, or let's say it's a reasonably cost regional event at $100,000, they're getting none of that from the registration fees. So that is on the backs of the local committee to fundraise. So that's kind of crazy. Anyways, sorry I interrupted you there, Mike, but I just wanted to give our viewers a little bit of a background there so they could know what we're ranting about.
Yeah, I think that's really valuable, and I think this is things that took me years to learn. What you just summarized, that this is not something that's apparent off the bat, and I think that's a big problem because I think it's giving a false sense of where the money's going, and then there's less accountability too, because when all the money's just going into one big pot and you don't see where all of it's going, it's hard to really understand what the value is for each of the individual items. And so when they say, okay, you're going to pay $1,000 for the kit of parts, well, maybe we don't think the kit of parts is worth $1,000 and we don't want to buy it. There's only a couple things we want and we'll buy it separately. Why should we have to pay that money for the kit of parts? Same goes for event fees. And I know event fees is a whole different topic, but I really do think that these event fees should be going to the people putting on the event. And if you need to make the team registration fee to be a first team $5,000 or $6,000 just for registering your team number in order to support everything that's going on at FRC, do that, but at least make it clear to us that that's the income that you need to come into headquarters in order to keep things sustainable on FIRST side of things. I think that's the clear way to do it.
So I want to shift the topic slightly because I think the next one that Mike and Libby have some strong feelings about is the minimum event standards. And why does a regional sometimes cost $100,000 to $200,000 while a district event can be $10,000? And where should the price point be? And what do we need at events? So this has become a topic that's come up on Chief very coincidentally just over the last couple days. So Mike, you want to kind of talk about your experience as you've researched the regional model and why events are so expensive in California?
Yeah, I can go into that a little bit. And obviously this varies a lot. And so, it's really hard to just paint every regional with these broad brushstrokes because there's a lot of different regionals. And it's kind of crazy to see some of the variants, but to hear people's stories about why they're doing things the way they are. From what I understand from reading the regional standard model, there are a lot of standards related to lighting quality, sound quality, et cetera, that some high school gyms can't support. However, we do see regionals in California that are essentially just district events. They're run in high schools. We have a regional coming up that can't even support 40 teams. It's under 40 team event because it's in a small high school. And that's great. I love high school regionals, but they are just district events. And so the standards are there, but it doesn't seem like they're being followed 100% of the time. But the people that follow them more to the letter of the law are putting on events that cost between $100,000 to $200,000. But the people that aren't following them are able to, squeak away some of those venue costs and other things that they can get away with while still putting on a regional event, which does have its own costs associated with it. I have a whole breakdown on my district proposal of what goes into a regional event. It's a little too much to dive into right now, but it definitely seems like the standard isn't applied consistently across all events, even in the state of California. And I wish more of our events were moving over to high school gyms to cut some costs, but that's maybe for another day.
So the question I want to pose to Libby, and then I want to hear Mike's response to it is, because Libby, you're in a team that competes in districts, but you've often said that, you guys want to go to events outside your district and that there's things that you prefer outside the district model, which I think a lot of people don't realize that there's some teams in districts who do see values and things in regional. So do you see, explain to me what the difference is between a $10,000 district event and a $200,000 regional, and don't just say $190,000.
Dang it, that was my quick answer. No, I think so. I want to pause before I get that answer because sometimes you are correct in that I have been critical of event standards in the district model, both within my region and in others. But I don't want that to sound like I think every event committee should be spending this much money, because that's a terrible way to provide a team experience. What I want to put out before I go into this is that it is very possible to have an inspiring and fun and flashy and awesome FRC event at a lower cost, but the effort has to be made. So I'm going to say that first. And there are so many regions that do put that effort in, and there are so many places and volunteers who are really about that. I will give you a story from my team, and this is years out, and it still breaks my heart. We went to, and this was years back when Mid-Atlantic was the first couple years when event quality was struggling. I don't think anyone's going to deny that event quality was struggling at that point, because it was the first time doing districts. Everyone was kind of going to these events saying it feels like an off season. It doesn't feel as formal. It doesn't feel as whatever, something. And this was back then. And we chose to go to a regional outside of our district that year. And I had a student on my team who had not yet seen a regional. We had kids who obviously in the transition period where they saw, you know, really, really flashy events and then they had to go to districts. I can understand them being disappointed, right? Sure, great. But one of our students who is brand new to the team goes to a regional and is sitting in the stands with us and turns to the group of mentors and says, oh, so this is what a real competition feels like. Like, I'm actually excited. And that was where I was just like, okay, we have to figure out how to keep the energy and the production value, not the production cost, the production value of an event and that standard into that lower cost event. And that is doable. It absolutely is. But it's something that has to be planned for. Those lower cost events that are going to say, oh, maybe we don't do the full lighting rig, but we still have something. The DJ brings it. Like, I'll bring our off season into an example. Not that we're perfect, but we have our DJ bring like an extra stick of lighting, and we've got the FIRST logo trolling all over the field. And it sounds so silly in a granular example like that, but it is so possible to have that flashy, inspiring atmosphere, like when you have at a regional or specifically at like a championship. The other thing is that maybe that production value level is reserved for district champs. We accept that the smaller events are in high school gyms and they're done in high schools and they feel like high school basketball. That's great. And then when we go to district champs, that's where the flash factor comes in. And I think what has to happen is that FIRST as a headquarters has to decide that for its constituents, not that each region gets to pick that on their own, because then you get this massive inconsistency between regions.
So Mike, same question for you. What do you see as the difference between a $200,000 regional and a $10,000 district?
So I will, compare the regional experience for my students with the off-season experience for my students. Okay. We go to a couple of different off-season events, and they range from put on a really great show like Chessy Champs, which I think everyone would agree is an amazing show, which I think is a perfect example of what Libby was just talking about. A group of people that are willing to put in the effort and do something that's really above and beyond what has been done in the past. And then we go to events like Madtown Throwdown, which RC on 1323 puts together with his crew down there. And that is the exact opposite of what Chessy Champs is in every sense of the word. It is completely relaxed. We had I believe in 2015, Madtown, we had a PVC pipe on the field playing the third robot on an alliance because we were down a robot and they needed something on the field to inbound a ball. So it's the opposite side of the scale. Now, what is the difference in my mind? I think you can see it, and I think Libby mentioned that the production value, you can see the difference when you look at the field and you look at the lights, you can see the difference. But I don't think you can see the difference when you look at a kid working on his robot in the pit. You know what I mean? Or when you look at a girl in the stand working on code for the next autonomous routine. I don't think you see the difference there. And that's where I question that a little bit, because I'm here to educate kids. I'm here to inspire kids. And I need to have events to do that. And when we run our VEX IQ League, we put on a good show. We have pipe and drape just because we wanted to. We have projectors, we have microphones, all that stuff, and we put on a good show. But when we need another event, it's so easy for us to do it that we just host another one, and then there's more kids that can be involved in Vex IQ. It's that easy for us, and it's not that easy right now. And that's where I think a lot of these secondary things get in the way of the primary thing, of watching kids work with robots, learn to collaborate, and be inspired by working with mentors in FRC, which is really, really special. So I don't see the difference when I look at kids being inspired. And that's just my opinion on it.
No, that's a really good point. You're spot on there, 100%.
Yeah.
So when I look at it, so I'm a fan of big show events. I mean, it's my own bias because I'm certain, just knowing who I was in high school, I mean, the first event that I competed at was, you didn't have to go to a regional back then. You go straight to championship. So I went to championship at Epcot, and that was the first event I was ever at. And that blew my mind. And just knowing that I was a part of something so major with, all these fantastic CEOs as judges and this huge show and like Disney bands, it was something for me. And that was definitely part of the reason for me wanting to stay involved in this program. So I do see the value in the Flash, but when I look at the difference in cost, I think one of the big things is, and people have been talking about it on Chief today, is and I think people have kind of been dancing around the issue, but in the district system, a lot of things that are normally done by paid contractors are done for free by volunteers. And so that's a double-edged sword. In some ways, it's like, yay, that's great. We have someone who's willing to do this work for free. But in the district model, there is a lot of work that's done on the backs of volunteers, where volunteers are doing the work that someone else normally does for a full-time or like a contract position. And that's part of the way how you get costs down. I mean, a lot of district events have moved from being in houses which were run by union labor to non-union places where volunteers can do the labor. That's a huge savings there. Like, the cost of union labor in some houses is crazy. But I think people forget that, you have to be willing to accept that these events are being run on the backs of volunteers. And that's a big part of where this cost savings comes from. Now, some of it's artificial. Some of it's that, you're locked into a certain contract with a certain contractor and you have to use their prices, and then once local events have been given the power to put it out for bid, they've been able to, find some people who'll do some stuff in kind and whatnot, but that can account for some of the cost differences. I think it's just important that, so if we get to the point where, all FRC events are taking place in high school gyms, and right now, let's say we go to districts where you're paying $2,500 for each event, you're two for $5,000. You could pay $2,500 to play with big robots in a high school gym, or you could pay $100 to play with small robots in a high school gym with FTC and VRC. What's the better experience? The big robots are more exciting and such, but is it 25 times more exciting? I don't know. But I think that FIRST should be careful as you try and make FRC events cheap. If you're going to lower the quality of FRC events in terms of what's being offered in Flash, but the registration fees are not going down dramatically, you're really kind of pointing your customers towards, and forget about Vex, forget about the competitor. Let's leave them out of the equation here. You're definitely pointing teams towards FTC, and it's difficult for me to make the argument that FTC isn't a better value in terms of inspiring that student that Mike was talking about who wants to code in the stands and that kid who wants to work on robots in the field. It's like big robots have their appeal and their flash to them. But, when we're talking about events being held in high school gyms and $2,500 for, I know like a lot of Vex events are $100. I assume that FTC events are like $100 too. If they aren't, that's crazy to itself. But I don't know. It's the production values, there's something to it. And I think we got to be careful about discarding it too quickly. At the same time, I think it's ludicrous that some teams are paying $5,000 to go to an event and other teams are paying $2,500 to go to an event in the same program.
Mm-hmm. So does that, and I know we don't want to go too long because we have another pretty big story to talk about, but is that where the idea, and I know this was discussed a lot around the concept of the championship progressions / super regionals, whatever the model is for FRC, we're not going to talk about that, but is that then the reasoning for it? I'm totally with you, Mike, on that. Quite honestly, it could be held in a cardboard box, and if my kids are inspired, that's what I want. But do the smaller events, do the district level events, we slide that event standard down to like, nope, doesn't matter. As you got a projector and a mic, it's all good. To then keeping the district championship and the championships consistent and flashy and big. And that's, I want to bring it in because my background with work is actually in esports, and production value is a lot like that for esports stuff. Is the small tournaments, the like, you know, random Milwaukee qualifier is in someone's garage, and then the world championship is at this giant convention with the flash and the lights and stuff. So is that maybe closer to the right fit, where there's each type of event has its own standard and they're actually stuck to, especially with DCMPs and championships being consistent?
Yeah. I think that goes into a lot of different things, including Karthik's raised the question of, is the point of FRC even to grow, or is FRC meant to be a showboat for getting people into FTC and other smaller level competitions? I think the answer is yes to that, but I think that's for a different show.
All right. I mean, we could do a whole show on districts and regional. We could do a show on when is California going to districts. You know, with Mike.
I say let's do it.
Let's do that show in 2 years when it's more pertinent, right?
It's funny because someone posted that I think that like the Ohio-Virginia region is perpetually 3 years away from being away from districts. And it just reminds me, there's a basketball player for the Toronto Raptors, and when he was drafted, the ultimate quote was, "He's 2 years away from being 2 years away from being ready." And so it seems like we got a few regions like that. So for our main story tonight, and I mean, Mike had such a beautiful post on Chief Delphi about this. I think my favorite post of all time, mainly because he had a reference to possibly the best 80s movie of all time, and Say Anything with the boombox and Peter Gabriel. Our main story tonight covers the massive waitlist that has been developed after the round 2 of the registration process this season. Last night on Fun, FRC Director Frank Merrick was on to discuss the registration system and the whole new process for the upcoming season. And while the overall process itself went relatively smoothly, except for a couple glitches for round 1, after round 2, over 700 teams ended up on waitlist. This wasn't a glitch of any sort. This was just due to limited spots. To give some background, all events have an actual capacity. You know, that's just like how many teams that they can fit in comfortably and know they can get the number of matches they want. However, the regional director, who will be responsible for one or maybe multiple events in an area, can hold back a certain number of spots. So they're not available during the initial registration process. So traditionally, it's been that you hold back about 10 spots. And these spots, this was meant for if you have a bunch of NASA grant teams signing up towards the end, or a bunch of late registering rookies. Because a lot of events were holding a huge number of spots, and because in the regional world now, there have been less new regionals created recently, but the team growth in FIRST has been steady at that 7-8% clip. So it's more competitive to get these spots. As such, there's been a glut of teams who are now on waitlists. What's even more complicated is with the new preference system. The preference system doesn't work properly with waitlists, because before, like if you opened, what's happening is if you'd opened up all but 2 spots at every event, teams would have gotten into events based on their preferences. But since there's less spots available, they're thrown onto a waitlist. And now the waitlist isn't being decided by teams' preferences or anything like that. It's now in the hands of the regional director in a black box system that no one really knows too much about. So regionals having this reserve process has left much of the waitlist process in the hands of the regional directors. So Mike, Texas is now moving to districts in 2019. Other regions might do as well. There are fewer options for regional teams. What do you think FIRST can do to avoid this issue right now? What are some of the issues that you see with all these teams being on waitlists?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit a lot of those issues, but I think the big one is this is a black box process. People don't understand what's going on. And there's a big difference between getting a good round 1 lottery spot and getting a good round 2 lottery spot. I think people are familiar with the fact that if you had a good round 1 number, that number was going to be, they were going to process in the reverse order. So you're going to have a bad round 2 spot. And I think as a team who wants to go to 2 events, 10 out of 10, I'm going to take a bad round 1 spot and a good round 2 spot, because right now in the situation we're in, those are the teams that have 2 regional events. The teams that had a good round 1 spot and a poor round 2 spot don't have a second event right now, us included. And we can tell that because of the way that things have filled up and who's on waitlist and who isn't. It's pretty clear that we had a fairly good round 1 spot, but it didn't matter because the event that we got into didn't fill up round 1. So we were going to get into it regardless of what our round 1 number was. So what can FIRST do? Well, I think they're going to have a growing problem. So I think they need to figure out ways to address it because, as you said, more regionals go to district. What we're seeing also, and this is a great thing, but it's putting a pinch on things, is a lot of international areas are starting to grow a lot, which is really exciting for FIRST and FRC as a whole. But what that means is when these teams in areas that have 1 regional want to go to a second regional, they're usually coming to mainland United States to compete for a second time. And so regions like areas like California, they don't just need to grow to match team growth. They need to grow to match team growth and a certain percentage of international team growth. And that's what we're seeing over the last couple of years is more and more international teams are coming to California to compete, which is exciting. It's really fun. But at the same time, it puts a big pinch on an already limited resource. And overall, I think this is what FIRST needs to understand. We wouldn't be having this discussion if it wasn't such a limited resource, if the supply-demand ratio was totally out of whack. But that's where we're at right now. There's so much more demand for these regional spots than there is supply. I was joking around with some friends earlier. One of them was saying that it used to be the case that FIRST and NASA would pay you to go to a regional event that needed teams to compete. I mean, that is totally far off from where we're at right now, where people can barely get into any event. I mean, we have pretty much no options within 15 hours of us that don't involve crossing international lines. To go a second time. We're at the mercy of the waitlist at this point. So I think FIRST needs to figure out, it goes back to our event standards a little bit. FIRST needs to figure out their supply side of this equation and how to get more events going because they just need more events. I think that's 100% clear and that needs to be understood. But beyond that, they also need to figure out how they're going to factor for international growth and how that's going to continue to put a pinch on domestic events. I think that's a real factor going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think I have a very external perspective on this as a district team, right? As regionals are something we hope and pray we can do as an extra thing, but if we don't do it, we don't do it. And we get our chance at so many events, but something that has always, and Karthik, as you were explaining it, even kind of like triggered me a little bit, is like the idea that the waitlist is a complete black box. It's just a pool of numbers, and then the RD gets to decide where to go. And that drives me nuts. It's not a waitlist. That's not a waitlist. That's if I'm meeting the name of the show here, that is not a freaking waitlist. It is totally ridiculous that I understand that there's going to be, needs to bring in the rookie that registered super late, or, these held spots needing to be in some way selected for special cases. But the reality of 10 spots like that, where you're going to get a rookie registering December 30th, is not going to happen. And it drives me nuts. And I can speak from personal experience with my team. It's right here. My last name is a little bit of a profile red flag in the FIRST community. We have
Drost.
This one. Well, that one just means I'm trouble. But
Eric's very influential.
This one. We've been contacted as a team on a wait list with like, oh, hey, Libby, your team's on the wait list. You guys want to come? And it's like, I'm not the Tim's contact at the time. I wasn't the Tim contact for the team. That's not okay. That it can just be like a buddy system of like, oh, we know that team, we know a person on that team, let's just fold them in. So it's totally not on topic for regionals and like what can FIRST do to help with regional teams not getting regional spots. But the fact that the waitlist is a total black box is completely ridiculous.
I think it's totally on topic because we are just talking about the issues with the waitlist. And I mean, the lack of transparency, and I understand why there's a lack of transparency because, like, I mean, if they're doing this the way that they should be, they've kind of have this internal flow chart where first priority is going to be late registering rookie teams. And then second priority is going to be teams who have no events. And then third priority is going to be teams who have one event and two event and so on and so forth. But like, I don't know if that, maybe you can show that to us because maybe you can trust that we can process that internal flow chart. But if you're really just pulling teams off where, I mean, I think all three of us can tell stories about teams who've gotten favoritism based on a relationship with an RD or have gotten the opposite because an RD doesn't like them. And that unfortunately is a thing, you know, like, I mean, I always say like I'm fortunate to be in Ontario, which is like the level-headed region where things kind of make sense. But I just think that there's other places, you hear some of these stories sometimes and it's like, whoa, that is crazy. Or you just notice, and I don't know, like transparency would help the situation a lot. I think teams would feel a lot better knowing where they are on a wait list and what the chances are of them getting into an event. And I understand that, you know, it's not an absolute, just because you're first on that wait list doesn't mean you're guaranteed to get in. Because again, like 3 rookies might show up or whatever. But like, allow us to use some good judgment, you know, and common sense. Like put the disclaimer in, don't book hotels based on this. You know, just because you're up here, you may not get in. But some transparency would help. A couple years ago, they at least had the system where it would tell you kind of like the ratio of spots to teams. Like it would color code them, but that apparently went away this year. It's like, why did that go away? That was like a modicum of transparency. And I don't know, like, I think one of the biggest issues this year was that the reserve spots, it was like 10 reserve spots at some, 30 reserve spots at some events. Like that seems like, that's crazy to me. So I don't know, like in Ontario, like, you know, FIRST always kind of set 10 as the default, but you know, the RDs and FIRST Robotics Canada up here, they moved to their default to 4 because they thought that was more based in line of the quantitative data, which they have of how many teams sign up late. So, I mean, Mark McLeod has all this data, so I'm assuming that FIRST does. Why don't you look at each event traditionally, how many teams sign up past the second registration date, and then only hold that many spots plus a little bit of a buffer for, you know, or if you're in an area where you know there's going to be a lot of NASA grants or some corporations giving out a lot of grants, but those grants aren't being handed out till November, then you hold a larger buffer. But like these standard holdbacks of 10 or 30, it just seems like it totally contradicts what the preference system was doing. The preference system was trying to provide an unbiased way of allotting teams into events. And the other thing you could do with the preference system is, the preference system is like the most basic algorithm right now. There are very well-established Nobel Prize winning algorithms for matching. Like the residence matching algorithm in the United States is one of the best algorithms for setting up, you know, basically where residents indicate, they rank the hospitals across the US, the hospitals rank the residents, and boom. So FIRST could very easily do that where teams rank their regionals that they want to go to. And now the regional is not ranking which teams they want, but you could just do it distance-based, where teams who are closer to the event get priority and use that matching algorithm. There are so many things like this, and there are so many brilliant people in FIRST who do algorithm design, who have studied algorithm design for a living, that we could come up with something really effective that would be much better than what we have right now. Like, and again, tweaking the algorithm isn't going to fix the core problem that there's, you know, in the regional model, there's just not enough spots right now. And I think something that people have forgotten, I looked through the numbers and I wish I did it in an Excel sheet, but I didn't like summarize it. But more and more teams in the regional system are trying to do 2 plays now. And I have a hypothesis for why this is happening. They see teams who are in the district model going to 3 events, playing 50 matches before championship, 60 matches before championship, and they see how well they're doing at championship. So even if with it costing $4,000 for an extra play, they are more than willing to do it because they know they need to be competitive at the championship. And so this is an additional crunch on regionals. So, you know, I mean, there's got to be something, you know, especially when I look at the event list and I see there's a lot of district events that are struggling to get teams, you know, that are like 25, 26 point. It'd be nice if we could let a regional team play at that district. You know, like last year or maybe 2 years ago in North Carolina, they had an event that ran with 24 teams. Yeah, I think it was 2016. And if one team was unable to play in the elims, the number one alliance would not have been able to capture, period, by rule, because they would have only had 2 teams on their alliance. Can't we let some regional teams go to those events? Like, the funding, the $4,000 that they pay doesn't go to the district, doesn't go to the event. Like, I don't understand why the citrus circuits can't sign up for a PNW event if it was super short on obviously the priority's got to be to get all the PNW teams in there and let them have their third plays and whatever. But if there's still room, and we have these 118, 148, 254, 971, and 1678 are all only registered for one event right now. I only know those ones, yes, because they're really good teams. I'm not trying to focus on good teams. They're just the teams that I check. I'm not going to check for 32-0 ass crack. But it's, we're at this place. We just need to find somewhere for these teams to play. And so hopefully, because it would be a bummer if there's a lot of teams who want to go to a second event who can't. And that's got to be a bummer for First headquarters, because that's $4,000 they're not getting.
Yeah.
So that, and that's money that's funding these programs and funding grants and doing all sort of stuff for a team. So it hurts headquarters, it hurts the teams involved, but it hurts all teams overall. So hopefully they can come up with a solution for this sort of things, short of they need to start more regionals, because that we know how hard that is, going back to our last topic.
Yep. I think you hit a lot of really great points. I think it's really important to understand, with the current lottery system and the number of event slots that are open up for without the reserve, the number of event slots before the reserve, there's too much demand to properly do a two-round of preference system. It's essentially, everyone gets one event, and then the lottery determines if you get a second event. That's where we're at right now. And so they need to either minimize the reserve slots in order to have enough bandwidth to support everyone putting in 2 rounds of preferences, or they need to do something like a lot of the, change the algorithm up, or possibly just make everything waitlist and have a big cabal between all the RDs and then figure out who gets into what regionals. This combo hybrid, it's kind of jack of all trades, master of none sort of thing. It just doesn't do the job right.
And, a little known problem with all this, an easy way to solve some of this is, if at registration, when you sign up your team for TIMS for the first time, that's when the 2 lead mentors go in, if you say, we intend on playing 1 event this year, we intend on playing 2 events this year, you could do that well in advance, just to give headquarters an idea of on demand, so they realize, we're going to be short in spots in this region. If we look at teams, there's this many teams who want 2 events from, it's so easy to generate maps of 100 kilometers out from an event, 200 kilometers out from an event. You could even do it in miles too. But you get to this point where if you had that idea of that demand, it might make things easier.
Yeah, and we're struggling right now with the political game that this is with regional directors. You put in some crazy hypotheticals, and it doesn't make sense with the way the waitlist works. We register for our local event round 1 because we're not going to get any preferential treatment to get into our event. Someone else registers for our local event round 1 and then is on the same waitlist we are for another event, and they're local to that event. They're going to get preferential treatment to get into that second event because they registered for our home event round 1, and now they're on their home event for the waitlist. This happens all the time, and that's what we're facing to just even get into a second event.
Well, regional selection has now become, there's game theory to it. And I've said this before, and I'm going to keep saying it. Building a robot is hard enough. There shouldn't be game theory for selecting your events. And it's it is, it's hard to deal with and trying to sort through this stuff. Libby, what was your experience this year signing up in MAR? Was it?
So our experience in First Mid-Atlantic was fine. We didn't get the second, I have no right to complain. We didn't get the second event we wanted because district events are in Mid-Atlantic are week 1 through 4, and then district championship week 6. So we wanted 2 and 4 to spread out. We got 2 and 3, and we're waitlisted for the 4th week. It'll be fine. It seems like our process went okay. It's obnoxious not to get into the event that you want to do, because it'll be really hard to do back to back with our kids, but we'll survive. But as far as I think because we're in such a smaller bubble, it wasn't like the end of the world frustrating. I that's why I've kind of like taken a step back in this conversation. I'm too lucky. Is we didn't get the schedule we wanted, but we got a schedule with 2 plays, which is what we're supposed to get. So it's what we got. And it'll be fine. I mean, our nothing really kind of goofed up about how we registered. So from a smaller bubble of events to choose from perspective, it actually seemed to go pretty smoothly. But maybe I'm missing some sort of catastrophic thing that I didn't see happen. But at least from our teams, it seemed like everybody shook out at least close to where they wanted.
Yeah, I know I live, 11-14, and all the Ontario teams were living a charmed life up here. We got most teams got the 2 events they wanted. Some didn't because they're very tight on spots in Ontario this year. So if you got a bad draw in the lottery, you might have been bounced from point to point. But I think we see that this is a problem, and some of it's hard to solve, but there are steps. So hopefully, I mean, this is the first year of the preference-based system, and I think it just was a confluence of bad events between like going to a new system and then having increased demand for regional capacity, and just like boom, and you suddenly end up with 700 teams on a wait list. Mike, do the Citrus Circuits have a plan if you guys can't get into a second event?
I mean, I don't know what we're going to do if we can't get into a second event.
How far are you willing to travel?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, traveling internationally, hopping on a plane is not going to be an option for us. We don't have the money to do that. And the team has to pay for all of our team's travel. So it's just not on the table for us. I think our team experience has really gone down over the last couple of years, because back when we started to pick up steam in 2014, we went to our 3 closest regional events, and that was it. And pack it up, we're done. And now we get into one event, and we may not get us into a second. When FIRST talks about making things fair, I mean, there's no level of parity between regional and district teams in this scenario. Absolutely not. We're playing on a totally different level. And I think one thing that FIRST really should consider, and something that I think would be a good, at least nod of the hat to the teams that are still stuck in this regional model, is to guarantee that teams that want to play twice get to play twice near their home. If they're in an area like California or Minnesota or Florida, or these areas that have established networks of programs, I think they owe it to the teams to say, if you want to play twice, you can play twice near your home. You're not necessarily going to get the schedule you really want, like Libby was talking about a little while ago, but you at least have our word that you're going to play twice. Mm-hmm. I think FIRST owes that to the teams that are stuck in the regional model, and they need to instruct their employees, the RDs, to make that happen for their teams.
So this was a great discussion. Before we move on, I'm going to give one plug to you, Mike. You're only about a 15-hour drive from the new Canadian Pacific Regional. They, I'm sure, would absolutely love to have a team like the Citrus Circuits up there, and there's still spots available. So if you're stuck, go to Canada, I'm just saying.
It is Tuesday through Friday, which is really rough on my PTO. So
yeah, that is, a challenge, but I'm just saying, it's out there for you.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, we'll consider it.
All right. So that kind of covers all the topics that we wanted to talk about, but we do have some questions from the Fun Nation. Some were posted on Chief Delphi, some were in the chat. The first one from a guy named Marshall from Team 900.
Who?
The Zebracorns. He asks, Mike, what would be your perfect date to take a regional director on to get your team off a wait list?
Oh, gosh. I saw this question. I really didn't know what to do with this question. I mean,
you
I can't
do what the
expect
rest of us do with Marshall and just ignore him.
Yeah. I feel like I have like a Marshall filter, just when I read this stuff. Like, okay, skip. No, I mean, you got to make sure you make your intentions clear with your RD from the get-go. You don't want to string them along. I think it's important really just to, you have those DTRs, you determine the relationship, whatever. You have to do that really early on and just say, I'm here for a regional spot. What can you do for me, right? And then take them out somewhere nice, lobster, steak, something like that. It's pretty simple, to be honest.
Well, it's interesting. Like we're joking about this, but there's, a few posters on Chief Delphi have said that they've gotten into events because they bring a key volunteer to the event. And so that guarantees them a spot in some regions. So I mean, if that's the case, I wish that was like outlined somewhere on the website where you say, hey, if you bring if you have X number of volunteers registered for 3 days in VIMS, you will guarantee you a spot at the event or something, like,
or you move up 2 spots on this wait list that is publicly documented. Like,
right.
It goes back to the fact that whether you get in off the wait list is completely random and depends as much on the phase of the moon as where you are in registration is just
I would just prefer if there was a nice flow chart so teams knew exactly why teams were moving up. And if it's true that, in a certain region you can move up because you're the lead robot inspector and you get to come to the event, well, then that should be stated somewhere and should be available for others. I don't know.
Yep.
The next question from Alfred from Team 1241, Theory 6. Mike, which event have you not been to that you would like your team to compete at?
I think I would love it if we could take our kids to Michigan State Championship. I think that would be just a great time. So many teams, such a unique culture that Michigan, I feel like, has developed of playing with robots and having a great time. I think I'd really love to take my kids to that sort of event so they could engage in that community. I think that'd be my number one pick. There's a lot of great regions that we've never played at before. We've really played in California and then champs. That's about it. But I'd love to see Michigan State Championship firsthand. That'd be a blast.
What about you, Libby?
Oh, well, the question was specifically for Mike.
Yeah, but
where do we want to play? Something that we have not done that I would like to do, and I'm not going to pick a specific event, is we have not done anything inter-district, even though we're so close to New England and to Chesapeake and all that kind of stuff. I actually think that would be really fun. This year's Mid-Atlantic schedule doesn't line up that well because we're all kind of crunched into a couple of weeks, but I think something that we want to at least try is maybe like a New England or a Chesapeake. That would be close and simple enough to travel to. Michigan's going to be big. Obviously, that'd be super, super cool, but it's also a huge travel cost to us. Something like a Michigan or Ontario district. We seem to work well with Canadians. I don't know. But we definitely want to give a shot at inter-district play. To answer the chat, just because it came up right this second, is we have done New York. We did Hudson Valley, Tech Valley in the last couple of years. So New York regionals, we love to. We're on the wait list for basically everything in our, drivable distance. But we're interested in some inter-district play potentially.
Yeah, I know, like, for 11-14, it's not in the cards financially, but it would be so cool to go to an event like in Australia or the new event in Turkey or in Israel, just to experience different cultures and see how things are done differently there. And, within North America, we were fortunate that our good friends, 254 came up in 2014 and 148 came up to Ontario in 2016. So we would love to be able to return the favor. And now that Texas is going districts, maybe we can go to Texas at some point. A question for Karthik, that's me. How has Ontario districts upped the ante over the years? Well, we've only had districts for 1 year, so, but especially with the district championship in 2017. Who is pushing all the energy? The volunteers, the community, the event centers wanting teams back like crazy. So it's really interesting. In Ontario right now, the folks at FIRST Robotics Canada have done such an amazing job with growth that they've kind of stationed it that all the district events in Ontario are taking place on the campus of either a community college or a university. And these universities all want FIRST at their schools. And because FIRST Robotics Canada has sold it to them and showed them the metrics and showed them that by having an event on your campus, you get more applicants from FRC teams. And so all these communities and schools want the events on their campuses. And so they're able to give really good venue rates for an event that is bigger than a high school gym and has more production, and the university will be actively involved in the planning of the event. They'll put some of their staff who work in their recruiting departments usually, or their engineering departments, on the planning committees, and they will make these events go. And so that's been a huge bonus for us in Ontario. So that's kind of been pushing the growth and really helped us with the transition to districts. We went from 2 regionals to 5 regionals and then into 9 districts. In terms of how did it up the ante for our teams, for years, the Ontario teams have gotten more competitive, and I could do a whole paper on why this has happened. A lot of it's been the influence, the 11-14-2056 event, the culture in Ontario where so many graduates stay with their high school teams. Most of the universities in Ontario are within like a 200-kilometer radius of each other and of the city of Toronto. So it's easy for not easy, but it's easier for alumni to come home on weekends and help their teams out. And so instead of losing knowledge when alumni graduate, the teams just get better and better. I think 1241 is one of the best examples of this, of how they've utilized their alumni over the past few years. You go to the 1241 pit and you assume that it's like 30 high school kids in there, and it's actually like 20 high school kids and 10 college mentors, So like they still have, because they all look so young, but it's just this incredibly bright group, and that's how that team has taken the leap to become, from a perennial good team to an Einstein number one seed type, number one pick type performer at championship. So that's been a big push for it as well. But like last year, I mean, we knew districts were going to be cool in Ontario, but we didn't realize what was going to happen. The Ontario District Championship, like we were having like a 60% four-rotor rate. Like it was rare to see matches without four rotors. The matches were so great. So many teams who'd been good had just got so much better, and just teams got to play more. They got to work with their robots more, and it was a nice system. I know there was a lot of teams who were in Ontario who said they, even after the awesome season we had, still prefer the old model. So like that's something we could talk about on another show. But I think the push has come, there's a lot of energy, and there's a lot of volunteers who just, who care about this program. And it's, again, the young alumni. So one thing that's very different about Ontario than, say, like Michigan or New England, I mean, when you look at our volunteers, they are young. You don't have like the, 60-year-old referees and stuff like that. Not that there's anything wrong with 60-year-old referees, but it's just the culture is there's a lot of alumni who are giving back, and there's a lot of energy, and there's a spark from that. And I don't know, like, Libby, you've been to a bunch of Ontario events in the past. I'm sure you've noticed things.
Yeah, I think there's and I think this is a lot of energy in our regions that support young alumni. I don't think it's necessarily unique to Ontario. I think Ontario does it super, super well. But anywhere you have a really vibrant community of young alumni who are still connected to the event, to the program, to their individual team, whatever keeps them coming back, whether it's a university program, like I know where I went to university, we had college credit for mentoring, and that was like something that kept alumni kind of aware of FIRST as they were off doing their other things. Whatever it is that keeps those young alumni coming back, you end up with these people who have a relatively decent amount of free time, maybe not a ton, but enough to volunteer. You get passion for the program, and most importantly, as volunteers and event staff, a knowledge of what it's like to be on a team and how it feels to be on the receiving end of an events decision. And I think that's where there's just so much strength in these alumni communities. But I agree that Ontario does that so, so well. And I need some of that energy to come south across the border to us United States folks. So I think, unless, Mike, you have anything else you want to, tack on to topics at all?
No, we love watching Ontario events. So keep building cool robots up there, guys, because you're one of the places we keep our eye on during the season.
Beautiful. So with that, we've covered all of the topics and all of the questions you guys have thrown in chat and brought our way. So we want to thank everyone who's making this show possible. If you want more FIRST Robotics in your life and you like what FIRST Updates Now does, we'd be absolutely delighted to have you click that follow button. That's the heart up in the top right corner, or even better, the subscribe button that helps support fun and gets you some awesome benefits, some emotes to spam in the chat, some badges for using all over Twitch. If you have Amazon Prime, you can subscribe to Fun for free. If not, it's just a few dollars a month. So if you want to support our show, I know some folks from some of my other Twitch communities are spamming the chat right now. If you want to support Fun, you can do that with a couple of different ways on the Twitch platform. Also, thank you to all the folks who have been cheering with bits in the chat, because that also supports the show and everything we do at Fun.
So Mike, I just want to thank you for being here today, but more than just thanking you for being here. And people always talk about how great the robots are, the citrus strickers and such, but I really want to thank you for being, a lightning rod in the community, and you're not afraid to talk about the tough topics. And I think that's important, but you're always do it in a respectful and a, intelligent manner that promotes discussion. And that's really important for our community. So thank you for that. And thank you for being on the show. Is there anything you would like to talk about before we go?
Yeah, thanks, Karthik. The one thing I wanted to plug was I'm really proud of the work that our team has done with our fall workshop series over the last couple of years. We brought that and started to incorporate it into the off season that we help host with Wolfpack and Eagle Force Robotics. And I think the link is going to be in the description, but it's on our website, and we have archives of our last 2 years of workshops, and our third series of workshops are going to be going online in the next couple of weeks. It covers the whole gamut of FRC teams and the things that FRC teams do. It's really special because we not only have some of our most talented kids giving workshops, but then we also bring in mentors from other programs that we really admire, like 971, 973, and get some of the talent there to give workshops as well. So if you're looking for really quality workshops from people that really know what they're talking about, I think this is a really great resource to not only, if you love FIRST, that's great, but share these links with the new kids on your team and the new mentors on your team that are just getting started in the program. I think this is a great resource for them too, and we're hoping to keep doing this on an annual basis and making it even better. But we post them online so that everyone in the FIRST community can see them. So please give that a look, and hopefully you find it to be valuable. And if you have any feedback, let us know. We'd love to make it better next year.
Those sound fantastic. I know some of my students actually checked something out from Chief already, so that's a resource I know the Midnight Inventors are going to take advantage of for sure. It seems as though we have a couple of extra questions in chat that we can answer offline. So guys, if you are still asking questions, the individual hosts on the show will be happy to answer your questions after the fact. But we do want to announce also that Fun has opened up our channel for community events for free. If you have a live conference, for example, a team workshop, a competition, or an event that you would like to have aired on our channel, please reach out to us on our Facebook page, which you can find linked below here on Twitch, or you can email admin@firstupdatesnow.com.
Yeah, like if you want us to stream like something that's first later or even not, like if you want to stream like you cleaning your Jordans, we might even do that too.
You really? We had to go there.
I didn't say a word. You are the one who just brought it up. It's almost like there's residue guilt from the time you scuffed my Jordans. I don't know. On behalf of myself and my dear friend Libby and our producer Nik Olsen working behind the scenes, I want to thank everyone for tuning in. Thanks to Mike for being an awesome guest, and thanks to all the moderators in the chat. We will see you next time on Fun, and we'll talk to you then.